In Blue Lock, conflict is everything. Not only do the teams going up against one another clash with their own ideals and skill sets, but even the individual players within a team often exist within a disharmonious ecosystem, lest they get left to the wayside by their competitors. And because of this conflict, you would probably expect the main character of the story to have an opponent, one particular player within the Blue Lock program to truly clash with above anyone else. A true rival, if you will. But during my recent reread of the series, I found that this wasn't as simple as you might expect. While Yoichi Isagi has clashed with numerous different characters within the story, pinning down who exactly he's aspired to beat above everyone else was much tougher than one might think. The Sasuke to his Naruto, the L to his Light, the Kageyama to his Hinata. In this video, I'll be taking a look at all of Isagi's rival candidates in order to determine which most closely aligns with this standard, and at the end of the video, I'll be explaining why Blue Lock seems to take on a bit more of an ambiguous approach when it comes to the main protagonist and his rival. One of the most important things to do when trying to find Isagi's true rival is make a distinction between players that Isagi has had on and off disputes with, and a person who has been a very consistent part of his journey and the story of Blue Lock as a whole. Take Shigiri for example. By all accounts, he should qualify as a rival for Isagi. By definition, they are both competing to be the best at their respective position, and while he is not quite as good as Yoichi at this point in the story at least, they are comparable enough in my eyes to be considered competitors and thus rivals. However, very few fans of the series would identify Blue Lock's own Speedster as a core rival for Yoichi. This can largely be attributed to a lack of explicit character interaction in this overly antagonistic way that is so common for Blue Lock characters, as well as a lack of explicit determination to beat the other specifically. Sure, Isagi and Shigiri do technically want to beat the other out to be the best striker in the world, but that's a goal shared amongst a dozen characters in the series, leaving a bit of an impersonal nature to their shared goal. Shigiri is much more of a rival for someone like Kunigami than Isagi because of that, but that's a topic for another video. Another character that I think fits the bill and can be understood through a very similar lens is Nico, the first person in the series to see the field in the same way that Isagi saw it, and the person who initially gave our protagonist some insight on how to use his own abilities. Nico certainly considers Isagi a rival, and he's also a reoccurring part of the story, but it's implicitly understood that he just isn't one of Isagi's bigger rivals because that simply isn't his purpose within the context of Blue Lock. A large part of this could be chalked up to him not being an important enough character for that, but he also isn't even competing in the same direct field as Yoichi anymore. They are both Blue Lockers and amazing players, sure, but Nico has relegated himself to the role of a defender, the role of a striker crusher, while Isagi still aims to be the best striker on the planet with no signs of plan alteration. In this sense, Nico can't really be Isagi's main rival because they aren't even aiming for the same thing anymore. With these two examples, the criteria for what Isagi's main opponent has to contain becomes a bit clearer. Firstly, they have to still be aiming to be a striker. If that isn't their intention above all else at the end of the day, they aren't fighting Isagi for that top spot. They are merely aiming to beat him in an individual confrontation whenever they cross paths. Secondly, in order to qualify, they must be at relative to or greater skill than Isagi for a majority of their screen time. Aiming to be a striker without this skill and calling yourself a rival would lead to things like Igaguri being a candidate. Thirdly, they must have wanted to beat out each other specifically at different points in the story. This means that no indirect rivalries like Sendo and Isagi are mentioned, helping us focus more on the characters and egos that mean the most for Yoichi's development. If he hasn't wanted to crush them and they haven't wanted to crush him, I can't even consider them worthy enough to be on this list. With that criteria being laid out directly, Bachira, Baro, Nagi, Ren, and Kaiser are the 5 characters that have the biggest claim to the true rival role. Meguru Bachira is a character that, for the first portion of the story, is the closest to Isagi in every capacity, and unlike many other Blue Lock characters over its run, he's remained steadfast in his desire to be an elite striker. To some extent, he even challenges Isagi directly to grow and evolve when they are separated, but it's when noticing this aspect of their relationship that you realize that Bachira isn't the best suited to be called Isagi's rival. He's a competitor, he's someone that has existed alongside Isagi for a long time, and he's had the consistent impact on the story around him to qualify, but I just don't feel a sense of tension between the two in a way that some other characters on this list create with Isagi. More than an enemy, antagonist, villain, or even rival, Bachira has always felt like a close friend to Yoichi. Even when they are directly competing against one another to make an impact on the sport of football, you can tell that they have no real animosity towards the other and appreciate their friend's continued existence within the Blue Lock program. Now, you could argue that friendship and being cool with one another isn't entirely antithetical to a rivalry, i.e. Yuno and Asta in Black Clover, but when you take into account the fact that we're talking about Blue Lock and almost every relationship is more directly antagonistic, it becomes a little bit clear that Bachira and Isagi's dynamic isn't necessarily one that is the most competitive. In fact, it's because of Bachira specifically that Isagi was able to achieve his first real awakening and combine his spatial awareness and direct shot weapons with some level of intentionality behind it. In the second selection, when Bachira gets stolen, rather than assume the attitude of beating him or becoming a striker more worthy of being chosen, Isagi wants to fight through this stage to get Bachira back, to steal him from Ren, who we'll discuss a bit later in this video. Even later in the second selection arc, when Bachira's awakening is shut down by Isagi, it's not entirely looked at as a moment of intense aggression or conflict, rather two characters achieving a sense of understanding on the field, one friend evolving to grow stronger and self-sufficient, with the other growing alongside them and not hindering their development. This isn't to say that Bachira is a less important or intriguing character because of this though. In fact, I would argue that Bachira is one of the most quintessential characters to the overarching narrative of the story, and in the beginning of this series especially, does an amazing job of injecting Blue Lock with a bit of charisma and fun. Despite all of these great traits that the character possesses, being Isagi's #1 rival isn't one of them. Nagi Seishiro is another Blue Locker who fits the bill when running him through the Blue Lock rival checklist though. He's extremely important to Isagi's journey and is a consistently developed and explored character. He's remained steadfast in his striker aspirations, and the two egoists have definitely desired to beat each other on numerous occasions. Unlike Bachira, I would also say that Isagi and Nagi's conflict shows itself more often and more explicitly. So much so that Nagi in particular has gone so far as to make beating Isagi his goal outright and has called him his rival in the story numerous times in the past. This would make you think that he meets all of the requirements, and technically he does, but not to the extent that some characters I'll be discussing later in the video do. See, Yoichi is Nagi's rival without a shadow of a doubt. After being defeated by Team Z back in the first selection arc, Nagi made it his mission to chase the feeling of excitement that came with effort by playing alongside Isagi and eventually defeating him, paying the hero of Blue Lock back for all of the times that he had lost in the past. So for about 100 plus chapters, Nagi's primary directive was to surpass Isagi, but I'm not sure that the same thing can be said in reverse. Sure, Isagi's wanted to defeat Nagi and has even challenged him on numerous occasions in the story, but he also does that with just about every skilled or talented character that stands in his way. He has a uniquely close relationship with Nagi, but once again, I'm not sure that I explained their dynamic as a mutually beneficial rivalry. One person views their dynamic that way, but the other person looks at them much more like a teammate or someone to help evolve their own plays. When they're against each other, they really get after it, but once they are on the same team, they achieve an intentional synergy that isn't seen with characters like Kaiser, Baro, or even Ren, and I think it's because Isagi is leading Nagi to an evolution very similarly to what Ryo has done for him in the past. In fact, Ryo even makes note of how he perceives his own relationship with Nagi as well as Yoichi's. They are people enamored by his talent who hope to draw out his world-class abilities and then harness them for the sake of their own goals. As far as I'm concerned, that kind of relationship cannot reasonably be called a mutual rivalry. We're taking steps to get closer to what that term means for the protagonist of Blue Lock, but we're still missing that aggression and constant oppositional attitude. Enter Michael Kaiser, a character that truly embodies conflict and antagonism with Isagi. In the entirety of Blue Lock, I honestly don't think there has been a single character that has evoked this level of hatred from Isagi and has also returned it with equal vitriol. Ren has definitely and does definitely want to tear Yoichi limb from limb, and Baro has and does want to do the same, but I don't think either of them really garnered the genuine strife and hatred of Isagi more than Kaiser. Everything about his demeanor, everything about his skill set, everything about him, down to the way that he introduces himself, is downright arrogant, condescending, and annoying as hell. Now, don't get me wrong, this doesn't make Kaiser a bad character by any means. In fact, all of these negative traits culminate into this warped charisma and charm that is hard to resist. But if you are a fan of Isagi, you will learn to hate Kaiser, because that bastard talks a lot of cash shit, but unfortunately can put his money where his mouth is. I mean, the first instance of meeting between Kaiser and Isagi is him messing up Isagi's evaluation for Bastard Munchin, invading his personal space and touching him, and then calling him a clown that'll just be set dressing for his own play. If that wasn't enough, he's also so annoyingly good at football that Isagi can't just crush him within the confines of a single game. Over the course of 2 full matches and about 40 chapters of straight antipathy, Isagi only barely beats Kaiser, and even then the victory is an incomplete one that relies on a lot of context. His true victory against him follows about 30 chapters after that. So for 70 plus hard-fought chapters, Isagi is dealing with Kaiser as a thorn in his side that just won't go away. Conversely, Kaiser feels the same way about Yoichi. Initially, he doesn't view him as a rival or a competitor, but as a stepping stone to make himself look better, to add to the legitimacy of his emperorship, and to further his own goals and endeavors. Following Isagi's assist to Kunigami and Yukimiya, as well as the development of Metavision though, Kaiser is forced to look at Isagi as a threat that must be crushed with extreme prejudice, and finally acknowledges him. So it's fair to say that these two are rivals that have the seal of animosity to prove it. So while Kaiser wants to go about being the best in a different fashion, both characters do intend to become the best at their position, meaning they are also aiming for the same goal. 2 out of the 3 articles on the checklist are marked with flying colors, leaving only the importance of Kaiser in the grand scheme of Blue Lock and Isagi's voyage to consider. And it is when this narrative weight, or lack thereof, is taken into account that I realize that the title of true rival cannot be given to Michael Kaiser. Now, I'm not attempting to disparage Kaiser's impact on the story or Isagi when I say this, especially when he's the one that introduced the character to Metavision, and in general has just forced him to continuously adapt and evolve throughout the story. But it's when compared to characters who have lived in this world, lived in this story much longer than him, that his narrative significance becomes comparatively weaker. 70 chapters is a lot of time to antagonize and poke at Isagi's weaknesses, but when compared to Rin, who was introduced 200 chapters ago, or Baro, who predates even him by about 30 chapters, that it then becomes obvious why in this category specifically, Kaiser wouldn't be as established. I wouldn't say that he's Isagi's greatest rival for this reason, but instead, he fulfills the role as a villain that aims to keep defeating the hero of the story, to keep dragging Yoichi off the stage as the main character. With Kaiser being eliminated from the running though, only Shoei Baro and Ren Itoshi stand as rival candidates for our main character. The battle between these two for the spot of Isagi's main rival is quite fierce in my mind, simply because both characters excel in aspects that the other doesn't, and sort of balance everything out for the most part. Baro, for example, has been an existing character and hurdle for Isagi significantly longer than anyone else I've talked about in this video, barring Bachira. He's also the character that I would say has the most beef with Yoichi, with the potential exclusion of Michael Kaiser. Conversely, Rin has the reciprocity of the rivalry down to a science, as no character other than him has bested Isagi so regularly and consistently, as well as been a benchmark of success for the character for so long. Bachira and Nagi are very rarely that. Baro ranks just above those two due to him being a wall to climb in both the second selection and Neo Egoist League, and Kaiser puts up the most fight with his 70 chapter long streak of Isagi competition, but they all fall flat when likened to Rin in this category. From nearly the beginning of the second selection all the way to the U20 game, Isagi is chasing after Rin and trying to surpass him in one way or another. He has instances where he's able to supersede both the audience's and Rin's expectations, but he's largely shown to defer to Rin as a player, and more importantly, as a striker. The direct parallel between the two's brain, eyes, and playstyle also lends credibility to the notion that Ren Itoshi is Isagi's most fitting rival. rival. 100+ chapters of contention and struggle, overwhelming narrative presence, similar abilities and weapons, as well as intensity coming from both sides, all lead to the conclusion that many had assumed I would come to in the beginning of this video. Even the core category that Baro defeats Ren in, aggression and hatred, gets amplified within Ren as a result of Isagi being Blue Lock's hero, and Sai recognizing his skill instead of his own brothers. Now, I will admit that Snuffy and Noah's comment about Baro and Isagi changing the future of football and fighting for the #1 striker spot is very reminiscent of something you'd see in rival characters like Naruto and Sasuke, but one line to me isn't enough to overcome the difference in emphasis that is placed on Ren's role relative to Baro's. This isn't me saying that Ren is more important in totality than Baro either. I don't necessarily think that's the case. While I find his character arc a bit more charming, the role of the heel that Baro plays is absolutely integral for the story and Isagi's character. The villain role that he plays relative to our protagonist is just that, a role well suited for a villain. A dark king, if you will. I actually think that when it comes to Blue Lock antagonist, Baro and Kaiser are about as potent as they get for the position, but when it comes to a straight rivalry, Ren has it in the bag, and if I were to rank them in descending order based on the previously established standards, I'd say it goes Ren, Baro, Kaiser, Nagi, and then Bachira in a distant last place. And while I could simply end the video here and call it a day, the fact that it's so difficult or even ambiguous to pin down exactly who Isagi's main source of competition is got me thinking and led me to an answer regarding rivalry and Blue Lock that is quite intriguing. I mean, think about any other story that has prominent objective rival character options. You're very rarely confused who the true competitor of the protagonist is, and there is no room for interpretation or second guessing a large majority of the time. Sasuke is Naruto's rival, L is Light's rival, Bakugo is Deku's rival. Very often, especially in shonen like this, the main rival is very stagnant and clear from the beginning, established with no uncertainty to be who they are, and the approach to writing them then is different. Even in sports manga like Haikyuu and Hajime no Ippo, this variety of character exists, but due to Isagi's mindset and end goal, I don't necessarily believe that one ultimate rival that remains the obvious answer from the first chapter to the last would assist in this story's execution. What Blue Lock needs, what Isagi needs, is not necessarily a Sasuke or a Kageyama or a Miyata, but Vegetas, Tiens, Piccolos, and Jirens. In order to evolve, in order to destroy himself over and over in the pursuit of being the best, Isagi can't just be fixated on one person and do his best to beat them. His true opponent, his true rival, lies with the entire striking world. It's why I use a series like Dragon Ball to convey my point. Sure, Vegeta is Goku's most prominent rival in a very similar way to Ren and Isagi, and he has cemented himself as a constant source of competition for Kakarot. But when analyzing Goku's character and looking at the type of person that he is, you realize that the only person he truly ever competes with is himself. He improves because he likes facing strong opponents. He improves because he likes fighting. He improves to protect his loved ones. He doesn't improve to beat Vegeta specifically. Vegeta, however, often improves to beat Goku and Goku alone. I view Isagi's relationship with the characters around him quite similarly, except with the internal battle and journey that Goku focuses on being flipped into the ultimate external one. Like most well-written characters, Isagi does deal with internal conflicts all throughout the manga, but where Goku improves and uses himself as the benchmark, Isagi improves and uses whoever is better than him at the time as his benchmark. Bachira could be his target for a time, but so could Nagi, and so could Kaiser, and so could Shigiri, and so could Kunigami, so could Baro, and so could Rin. Anybody and everybody that Isagi can learn from and devour is a target in his eyes, leading him to not really having a rival as prominent as some iconic duos, but more aptly fitting the ethos of Blue Lock. If I was forced to name one individual as of now, I'd still pick Rin as the cream of the crop, but I don't think that this is even the whole answer. Anyone skilled enough to catch his eye and egotistical enough to fight on the same stage is someone that Isagi must overcome and triumph against, making every character at some point or another a rival that must be conquered by Blue Lock's main character, Yoichi Isagi. This is my first full-blown Blue Lock analysis in quite a while, so I hope you enjoyed it. I've covered Blue Lock on the channel before a few times, so if you like this video, you can check those out, as well as subscribing for more videos like this sure to come to the channel soon. Let me know who you guys think Isagi's true rival is, or if he even has one down below, and as always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.